what is a Bitcoin ETF and how does this work? And what is a Bitcoin ETF getting you as an investor that you can't get by buying Bitcoin directly from a brokerage or even MicroStrategy, Tesla, which owns significant amounts of Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, first off, I think Bitcoin, you want to, if you're trying to get a pure play, you want to get the most efficient, the most secure way to do so. There's two ways to do so. One is to go buy it yourself. So you put up an exchange or go and get exposure and then put it in your own wallet. And those are, of course, things that lots of sophisticated people will do, or some people who work within the exchange world will do. But the reality is that buying this thing in your normal brokerage account, being an asset allocator as an individual or as an institution, this is a very difficult place to do that efficiently. And for the first time, we'll be bringing a first ETF, so exchange traded fund, the traditional, elegant structure of the ETF, and eBitcoin brought together in a really unique way, using physically backed Bitcoin. So actually, every dollar in the ETF will be owning a dollar of Bitcoin backing it.
So what is better about this than just buying your own Bitcoin?
So first off, there's a lot of efficiency elements. So you talked about, call it this, your dad reaching out to you and kind of sending you a text about Bitcoin. The reality is that beyond the sort of the 10% of people who, will go through the purposes of opening up a Coinbase account or going and, going through the efforts of mining or doing your own exposure and putting it on your digital wallet, most people, Bitcoin is non-achievable asset. It's not something that they can actually access. So this will be for the first time, make Bitcoin truly accessible to every investor beyond just going and doing it yourself and putting it onto your own wallet. And that is a very powerful element. It opens up every brokerage account, every investment account, every institution to be able to now access Bitcoin in that efficient way.
Som, when does this hit the market, and are there any restrictions on non-Canadians buying it? And if not, how big of a market are you really expecting with this?
So it's launching Thursday on the Toronto Stock Exchange, the TSX. Like any other security, it is available for trading by any investor. It is driven and launched for Canadian investors. It is a Canadian fund. That said, investors around the world do buy securities both on any exchange around the world, so they can purchase this. But frankly, look, we're excited. I think the amount of interest and the amount of energy around this, being the first in the world to do this, I think it gets a lot of attention. I think we're getting a massive amount of inbounds and interest. I think it's going to be fun to get this thing into the marketplace.
So it seems to me that Canada has basically made history here, crypto history, because, in the United States, people have been struggling and trying to get an ETF for what seems like forever. How did Canada pull this off? Like, how did they make it through? Because in the United States, for example, one of the biggest concerns has been market manipulation, or that the market wasn't mature enough. I guess that second one now is maybe less relevant. But yeah, how did this get past Canadian regulators?
Well, I think it was actually working with Canadian regulators. So we spent the last 8 months confidentially working with the regulators to understand, what their challenges were and their hesitancies, but more importantly, help them kind of overcome that. It's funny, back in 2017, both in the United States and in Canada, there was a fair amount of players that filed for Bitcoin ETFs. And I've said quite bluntly, we were one of those players, but we said back then, if the regulator had actually allowed for them, it would have been a mistake. The infrastructure was just not there to support both on the custodial element, from the trading element, from the liquidity element, to support an efficient vehicle like an exchange traded fund. Now today it has. So much work has been done in the back end of this, the plumbing, to effectively allow for something like this. I think the regulators are comfortable with that. If you just think about it simply from a market maker, someone who has to make markets to ensure that the price of the ETF trades right in line with the Bitcoin price all throughout the day, that market maker to be able to use the liquidity functions that are in the marketplace through futures and other type of hedging is now available to them, whereas 3 years ago, that would have been extremely challenging.
So I think the question that's on U.S. I think the question that's on the mind of people in the U.S. is this going to expedite things in the United States? Like, how likely is this move going to be to lead to a U.S. ETF being passed sometime soon? What is your take on that?
Well, look, I mean, it's hard to speak on behalf of the SEC, but I would just say, this is a time. I think this is a good message that you want as a regulator to allow people to get access to something. If you don't regulate something, they're going to go get access to it anyways in any other way. They'll either go access it in an unregulated way, which of course opens up much greater investor risk. And then the second is they're also then going to go buy some vehicles like the Grayscale and other vehicles that are trading at big premiums or have traded at big premiums. And ultimately, these things, aren't in the best interest of customers too. So I think that giving people access in an efficient, regulated way is something that regulators should be urging themselves to do, given the fact that people want access to this asset.
What big concern that the American regulators still have that the Canadian regulators answered? I guess that's the big question. And how can you export that to the United States, to the SEC, for instance, that can address those concerns? Have you guys thought about doing that yet?
Well, I mean, look, I mean, I think that the regulators do talk to each other a fair amount, and of course, it is in a global world today. I mean, trading is a global element, so I think that investors will be using this, and I'm sure a lot of the American issuers will use this as a sort of a bar to now go to the SEC and say, look, I mean, Canadian regulators got comfortable with it. Why can't we? Can we overcome that? We're not going to go and spend time with the SEC. We're not a registrar in the United States to do that, so we're not going to spend time with the SEC in the short term. But I do think that this is hopefully a really good push for the SEC to get there. Whether that happens in 3 months or 12 months or beyond, I don't know. But the reality is it's a push.
What do you have planned for ETH?
So we already partnered and built a vehicle a number of years ago, back in 2017, back when I got really excited about the space. We launched something called Ether Capital. So we've actually had the first kind of Ether direct version of access to something really unique in this space, trading on the Toronto Stock Exchange, on the Canadian exchange. It's another exchange that trades on called the Neo Exchange that holds Ether directly, and also has Maker, one of the really unique stablecoin platforms, and then Wire, a very cool kind of onboarding platform and technology private company. And so we've actually really been focused on this space. We think the digital asset space is a really powerful one, and big fans of both Ether and Bitcoin for very different reasons, obviously.
But no ETF yet?
No ETF yet. I mean, look, getting a Bitcoin ETF was the first sort of hurdle to get done. It is, of course, the largest segment. It was the easiest to get the regulators to really get comfortable with. Second will be to work on an Ether product.
Som, I understand that there are other ETFs in the pipeline in Ontario. So why was yours first?
Well, I think first, it was a lot of people file publicly in the last couple of weeks. We've been working with the regulators going back to last summer. So I mean, even though we weren't public with ours, we were private, and we were working through the process with them. And I think that gave significant lead advantage for us. But also, it was our work, our efforts that got the regulators to get comfortable. They used our work to kind of get the whole. We have a national regulatory structure that they all have to work together on this. They use our work to basically put the policy in front of them. And so that was really powerful, and so allowed us to basically be first to market.